While they were talking, Thalaris suddenly attacked in a different direction when she noticed someone eavesdropping. If I'm going to fight, I'll fight. Only then did I realize it was Khan. At that moment, the leader of the group was surprised to find out that Khan was with Chiron. She immediately recognized Khan, even though they hadn't seen each other in a long time. As for Chiron, he told Khan to ignore the woman and just hand over the letter to him. The letter, which was from Kashmir, mentioned the recent accomplishments of young master Jin. It said that Jin Runcandel had beheaded Muran Zippel, the master of the Seventh Tower. Behind Khan, it was added that there had been rumors about a massacre in Kalin. In the news, they mentioned an anonymous traveler who had taken down Zippel and freed the locals. During the rescue, the master of the Seventh Tower, Muran, was killed, and Kozak, along with the White Knight faction, confirmed that they were also attacked. Hearing this, Chiron was shocked. He didn't think the kid was strong enough for that. After a moment, he turned to ask, "Did you have a hand in this, Talaris?" Talaris didn't hide anything and admitted that she had been asked by Kashmir to help. This only made Chiron more confused because the letter didn't mention anything about the Icebow Master's involvement. Clearly, the young double sword needed a warning. Upon hearing that, Talaris disagreed with Chiron's foolish idea. She told Chiron that he should reward him instead. Kashmir made it clear who he was loyal to. He wasn't loyal to the Lord, he was loyal to Jin Runcandel. The head of the Chiron family, after hearing the explanation, felt it made sense. He admitted that he had put his son in a dangerous situation and also thanked Talaris for his help. However, with Talaris' reputation as an Icebow master, could he just let things slide like that? If you owe someone, you should repay them with something, Talaris said. So, think about what I said earlier. Your youngest son and my daughter would make a great match. At the same time in Tikkun, Jin suddenly felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Could this be the after effect of the battle in Kalin? Nearby, Kashmir immediately confirmed it was indeed the case. I get that feeling sometimes too, young master, Kashmir said. Nanny Gilly had a different thought. Could it be because of Jin's rapid development that this was happening? Well, that's definitely a possibility, she said. Since the battle in Kalin, Jin's swordsmanship has reached the 6-star level. His dart power is at 5 stars, and his magic is at 7 stars. Becoming a 7-star mage just by using a single asterisk, track Quang asterisk, is truly insane. However, right now, Jin can't go any further because doing so could weaken the seal. Meanwhile, while everyone was talking, a butler came in to report that someone was looking for Kashmir. What's more, this person claimed to know the location of a secret base belonging to one of Hewfester's members. After hearing the butler's report, Jin couldn't help but wonder who this person might be. But before he could think too much, his eyes landed on a very familiar figure. It was Jet, the same guy Jin had met back when he was in Arkan. Thinking back, Jin remembered how this con artist had tricked him countless times in his past life. But since Jet had a child, Jin had spared him. Judging by his current appearance, Jin guessed that Jet was going through something pretty serious. On the other side, Kashmir was conducting the interrogation. Even though Kashmir asked directly how Jet knew about his base, Jet kept going around in circles, talking about irrelevant details. Still, Kashmir quickly deduced that Jet was someone from testing. As for the original question, Jet wanted Kashmir to accept him first before giving any answers. After all, for someone in intelligence, security is the most important thing. Of course, right after that, Jet found himself on the receiving end of a furious outburst from the Hewfester commander. He wasn't any less impressive, as he continued to share the second important piece of information. The person that the Rainbow Seven was investigating, Spider-Hand's Allah, I got some info on him. Right at that moment, a voice from a distance called out, asking to know the information he had just mentioned. Jet, noticing Kashmir's expression, felt a little confused. He wondered why Commander Kashmir of the Tian Outpost seemed so afraid of that person, even calling him Young Master. When he turned around, he was shocked to realize it was someone he knew. Of course, meeting Jin again felt like facing death for Jet. He barely got away the last time they crossed paths. With that fear still gripping him, Jet shouted out 3 words, "You're a fraud." Sir Kashmir, this scoundrel is a fraud. He pretended to be Varaden Zippel when he was in Arkan. At the same time that Jet shouted those words, Kashmir was about to draw his sword to deal with him, but then something unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, Murakin barged in, seemingly ready to talk to Kashmir. As it turned out, Kashmir had promised to buy ice cream for the Shadow Dragon, but he had forgotten all about it. And Jet, Murakin, immediately recognized him as the person who had spiked the orange juice earlier. After this whole scene, Jet was starting to lose his footing. He now realized that Commander Kashmir was the lowest ranking person in the room. The one he had just insulted, though, that person held the highest rank. After thinking for a moment, he immediately began bowing repeatedly to apologize. "I truly have eyes like a blind man, sir. I was so foolish not to recognize you." Jin was already used to this kind of behavior, so he got straight to the point. What he wants to know is information about Spider-Hand's Allah. Then they learn that Allah's real name was Taken Marius, a former cadet from the Runcandel family. When Jin heard that name, it felt oddly familiar, so he turned to ask Yili. She mentioned the name Taemoon Marius, Luda's wet nurse. That was her family name. Spider-Hand's Allah came from the kingdom of Delki, which was part of the Hufester Alliance. As a commoner, he managed to pass the cadet exam at Runcandel. Jet added that the name Taken Marius was erased the moment he became Spider-Hand's Allah. At this point, Yili confirmed that Taemoon, the wet nurse, was indeed from the kingdom of Delki. She also mentioned that the exam had taken place in 1776. 20 years ago, Kashmir, upon hearing this, immediately placed his sword to Jet's throat. That was because 20 years ago, Delki had been embroiled in a civil war. It's impossible for one of their people to have taken the exam at that time. Unlike Kashmir, Gilly believed Jet wasn't lying. It's very likely that someone within the Runcandel family helped Allah. If that's the case, there are only two possibilities. Either it was a pure-blood member of the family or one of their wet nurses. The wet nurses of the Runcandel family didn't just raise the children. Their status grew alongside the person they cared for. 20 years ago was when Luna was recognized as the temporary head of the family. Of course, back then, the wet nurse Taemoon also held considerable power. If Taemoon and Allah were related, the person who hated Jin in the past was probably Taemoon. After thinking it over, Jin asked Jet to lead the way. You want to go to Delki yourself to confirm everything, he said. You want to know if this is just a scheme between Allah and Taemoon, or if there's someone else pulling the strings. In the kingdom of Delki, Allah had returned and was leading a criminal syndicate. However, while he was busy asserting control over his subordinates, another person appeared. The moment Allah saw her, he immediately recognized who she was. What's more, if she was here, the other guy would be too. Before he could even finish his sentence, Allah's life was abruptly taken. For him, a person like Allah wasn't worth living. Even after receiving help from his mother, he still chose to live like a common thug. The young man nearby was similar. It wasn't that they wanted to do it, but everything they were doing was for that person. Back with Jin's group, Kashmir was investigating the Marius family, the foster family of Taemoon. According to intelligence from Hufester, although this family was common across the continent in the kingdom of Delki, only one organization used that name. That place was none other than the orphanage called Moon Sacrifice. On the outside, it appeared to be just a regular orphanage, but in reality, it was where the Delki royal family trained children to become assassins or spies. There were rumors that children there were allowed to be friends with each other, only to later be forced to kill those very friends. The children who survived would become assassins with a deadly mission. However, the orphanage was eventually shut down after the prince's faction won the civil war. 10 children from there were released and became free citizens. One of them was Spider-Hand's Allah, the person who had just been killed not long ago. With that, Casper handed Jin a file containing the details of the other 9. It included all the information, even their addresses. As soon as Jin picked up the stack of files in his hands, he felt confident that this time he would catch the person responsible, the one who had cursed him, making it impossible to use a sword. A few hours later, Jin and Jet arrived in the kingdom of Delki after using a teleportation gate. According to the information they had, the last person to live nearby was Gaber Marius. He was a thug in the Nultara area. Although Jet suggested they find a place to rest first and take action the next day, Jin was determined to go right away. And so, after a few more hours of travel, they finally reached Caper's house. They knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. That's when Jin noticed something strange nearby. Along the riverbank, there was a large crowd gathered, talking excitedly. When they got closer, Jin saw 2 bodies. With a quick glance, he could tell they had been killed by poison and wind magic. The person who did this was incredibly bold, especially since it was done with magic in the Hufester Association's territory. While Jin was lost in thought, someone in the crowd suddenly shouted a curse at the man lying dead on the ground. From what the person said, it turned out the body was Gaber, the very man Jin had been searching for. The bystander continued, I saw Gaber stumbling drunk through here just last night. Then, after a scream, the murder happened. Jin thought for a moment and speculated. It seems like Gaber was the original target, and the person with him was just a witness who needed to be silenced. If that's the case, they must have been in a hurry. After thinking for a moment, Jin immediately told Jet to continue their journey. The next person they needed to find was Weatherway Marius, about 2 hours away. Hearing this, Jin ordered them to try to get there within an hour. Just 1 hour later, as Jin feared, they arrived to find Weatherway's body. It was clear he had been poisoned. Judging by the state of the body, he hadn't been dead for long. Putting everything together, Jin was certain that someone was trying to kill off all the survivors from the orphanage. So your job is to hurry up before it's too late. With that, Jin and Jet visited each address listed in the files. As expected, everyone had died from poison. Still, Jin wasn't ready to give up. As nightfall approached, he decided to check one more house. This time, he noticed something different. There were traces of level 8 wind magic. Hellwind. Clearly, the situation was getting more intense. Nearby, Jack reported that only 2 people were left to investigate. If things keep going like this, we won't be able to catch up with them, Jet said. Hearing this, Jin paused for a moment to think. A few moments later, he made up his mind. That night, in the capital of the kingdom of Delki, the person's hand was left with only one name still unmarked. She was none other than the one Jin had been tracking. At that moment, she turned to the person beside her and said, "This is honestly getting boring. Didn't we hear that those people were trained like we were? How can they be so weak?" From their conversation, I learned that they, too, had been trained by the Moon Sacrifice Society. However, these individuals were specially trained. The ones they had just killed were considered defective products to them. As they spoke, the 2 of them eventually arrived at the last target's house. With a quick swipe with their swords, they sliced through the door, but the sight before them caught them off guard. This last person was not as foolish as the others. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Jin's group was desperately running for their lives. One of them, panting and worried, asked Jin, "Could it be that everyone else is already dead?" And it was true. Jin explained that some people were trying to wipe out all the members of the Moon Sacrifice Society. Furthermore, because they had skipped over one person and headed straight for him, they were able to warn him in time. At this point, the response from the other person truly surprised Jin. He said that despite their age, those trained like them were not so easily killed. Only 2 people were capable of doing this, Varys and Kujen. They were on an entirely different level. Upon hearing this, Jin couldn't help but ask, "Didn't the announcement say there were only 10 survivors?" The other person replied, "There are 12 survivors in total, and the 2 are chasing war monsters trained by that person." No sooner had they spoken than a storm suddenly began to brew behind them. Who else could it be, if not Varys and Kujen? They quickly caught up and were ready to strike. However, just before the 2 of them could make their move, a bolt of lightning unexpectedly interrupted their attack. To their surprise, standing there was a young man in a black cloak. He didn't waste any words but simply stated, "They will pay the price for causing trouble on Runcandel's land." The young man glanced at Varys, and from the look in his eyes, it was clear she wasn't from Zippel. Still, she appeared to be at least an 8th level mage. As for the 2 behind her, after a brief exchange, they made a decision. Isn't it simple? Just turn old Den into minced meat and ask the other guy for answers. In response to Varys' arrogant words, Kujen warned her not to underestimate their opponent. I have a feeling that man in the black cloak is no ordinary person. Immediately after, Varys unleashed a rapid wind attack. Though powerful, it was easily blocked by the young man. At this point, Varys started to wonder, could it be true, like Kujen said, or maybe it was just the exhaustion after a long day of work. On the other side, Jin knew that the attack just now was a level 4 sword strike. She was likely conserving mana after using too much earlier. However, the real problem was still that silver-haired guy. As Jin thought this, she glanced at Kujen, only to realize that he was drawing his sword. That meant he was a swordsman who used poison. Seeing the situation getting dangerous, Jin shouted, "Jet, take Den and his daughter and get out of here." Before she could finish her sentence, Kujen lunged at her. Just from the brief clash of blades, Jin could immediately feel the overwhelming strength he had. This guy was at least level 8. Kujen, on the other hand, seemed surprised to discover that Jin was a spell swordswoman. Without hesitation, he launched a flurry of attacks on her. Meanwhile, not far away, Jet was still yelling Jin's name, insisting they couldn't leave her behind. But that wasn't going to happen. After Jin briefly held him off with some confusing words, he quickly grabbed Den and his daughter, rushing to escape. But things weren't going to be that easy. Varys, who was free to move, would be the one to take on the task of hunting down Den. Once again, the special move took place. After gathering his energy, Jin flashed a wicked smile at the 2 of them. "This is a special gift for both of you." With those words, a massive burst of light surrounded the entire area. As soon as the light faded, Jin immediately charged toward Kujen and delivered a strike. But an 8th level swordsman isn't someone who can be easily defeated. Kujen quickly retaliated with a counterattack, but fortunately, Jin managed to dodge it. Meanwhile, nearby, Varys was still struggling with the blinding light from earlier. She was frantically shouting at Kujen, not realizing that he too was dealing with the injury he had just taken. At that point, with no one else to rely on, Varys decided to take matters into her own hands. She began unleashing her dark magic in a frenzy, her anger directed at Jin for injuring Kujen. "This time, you will pay for this." However, her fury was quickly quelled by Kujen's calm voice. He simply said, "Varys, stay calm. You've already used too much mana today. If you push yourself any further, the backlash could be dangerous." Jin had already anticipated this. He knew they wouldn't fall for the trap he had set so easily. In response, Kujin took out a vial of something from his pocket. As Jin watched in shock, Kujin simply drank the entire vial of poison. Jin could feel the overwhelming energy radiating from it. As soon as Kujin swallowed it, the wounds he had suffered earlier healed instantly. He was clearly stronger than before. Now, Kujin's objective had shifted. Jin had to die before Den was captured. As soon as Kujin finished speaking, he moved with a speed Jin couldn't even follow, suddenly appearing behind him. Jin thought that the sword strike would be the final blow, but luckily he managed to hold on for now. However, that wasn't the end of it. While the two were locked in their sword fight, Varys kept launching magical attacks at Jin. Fighting two level 8 opponents was incredibly tough, even for a mage like him. At that moment, Kujin started to feel something strange. He could sense that Jin's aura was only that of a 6-star swordsman, yet his strength was on par with his own. And sure enough, Kujin's fears were starting to come true. Without warning, a fierce burst of green fire erupted from Jin's body. Its target was the mage, who was slowly running out of mana. Of course, the mage recognized what it was right away. The Phoenix Test, a flame every mage dreamed of wielding. In that moment, Varys was defeated by the panicked gaze of Kujin. But he wouldn't have to wait long. His turn would come soon enough. Around him, an endless darkness began to close in. Before he could even understand what was happening, the battle was already over. With a single strike, Jin had taken down Kujin, the 8-star swordsman. As for Kujin, all he could think was this: that power for the darkness. I've never seen anything like it before. I can't believe a swordsman who wields the Phoenix Test also has access to such terrifying strength. But don't you feel anything? Before he collapsed, Kujin left his final words. Clearly, he was talking about the poison he had used. Almost immediately after, Jin also fell to the ground. At that point, all three of them were heavily wounded, and it was likely that the one in the worst condition was the red-haired girl. Nearby, Jin, after struggling with the poison, was starting to push himself up. He knew that staying here wasn't an option. He had to get away quickly before the other two recovered. Meanwhile, Kujin, already standing, gripped his sword once again. Was another fight about to begin, even though neither of them had fully recovered? It seemed that way at first, but just as both were about to make a move, a voice rang out from a distance. "I found them, Prince. I found them." Over there in the distance, a group of soldiers with bows are getting ready to fire arrows at Kujin and Varys. "Knights, move forward with me." The person leading the group was the third prince of the Delki kingdom, Laika Delki. When Jin saw them, he guessed that Jet must have called them. It turned out the prince wasn't as bad as he thought, but before he could finish that thought, Kujin, ahead of them, shouted a threat. "I will definitely come back for you." As he said this, he picked up the unconscious Varys in his arms. "Don't think you'll be safe after causing all of this, you bastard." With that, the two of them quickly vanished before the eyes of countless soldiers. Despite the efforts of Delki's troops to chase them, their strength was limited, and they were unable to catch up. As for Jin, the third prince Laika turned to him and asked, "Are you with them?" But before Jin could respond, he passed out in the prince's arms. "Healer, come quickly." As the third prince's shout echoed, Jin's vision slowly faded, even though he knew this was not the time for it to happen. A few hours later, Jin suddenly woke up and found himself in a strange place. He looked around and saw the third prince nearby. Laika explained that since Jin's identity was still unknown, he had been brought back to the prince's mansion for safety. Jin asked about the time he had passed out, and the other person replied, "You were unconscious for 3 hours. It's a miracle you didn't die. The toxins in your body were so strong that they could have killed an 8-star swordsman. However, if you're from the Runcandel family, it's different," Laika added. After saying this and seeing Jin's expression, Laika was sure that he was the real Jin Runcandel. Asterisk that faced, "It really is the same as when I saw him at the ball," asterisk, he thought, then continued asking Jin about what had happened. Laika was curious about the background of the two people. Even though they were covered in deadly wounds, they had still managed to escape from the Knight's encirclement. Laika couldn't help but wonder how Jin had managed to injure someone as monstrous as the other person. He knew Jin was a genius, but not long ago he was only a 5-star. Now he was maybe a 6-star at best. There was no way he could have defeated an 8-star. At that moment, Jin spoke up. However, instead of answering that question, he simply thanked Laika. Laika, in turn, didn't find this surprising. Saving a Runcandel family member on Hewfester soil is an honor, even if you're still just a reserve flag bearer. Hearing this, Jin couldn't help but ask, "Has the prince informed the town hall about this yet?" Laika replied, "No. As soon as I brought you here, those in power began sending troops to ravage Delki." At this, Jin was taken aback, because if what the third prince said was true, they might actually be allies from Tigen. On the other side, Leica continued, I need to ask something of you. When you become the flag bearer of the Runcandel family, could you send reinforcements to Delki? Also, the gold mine shares in Delki belong to my family, and I'd like to request a portion of them back. After a long pause that made Leica break into a sweat, Jin finally spoke again. It seems like you think my life is pretty expendable. I'll send twice the number of reinforcements and I'll give up all the shares of those gold mines to Delki. Seeing Leica's stunned expression, Jin reassured him once more. I mean every word. In the future, there will be nothing I can't do in Hufester. This left Leica confused, wondering to himself, how could that be? Even as flag bearer, he shouldn't have that much power, unless he's going to become the future head of the Runcandel family. The next day, at the mansion of the third prince, Leica, Murakan, and the nanny Gilly had just arrived after several days of travel. It hadn't even been that long since they left, but it had already made everyone worry to the point of panic. Why did you fight an 8-star mage and swordsman? But as usual, Jin responded with his usual indifferent expression, as if nothing was wrong. Sorry everyone, I promise I won't do it again. Yeah, right? Who's going to believe your promises? Outside, the Holy Sword Kashmir and the Silver Dragon Quikentel were also there. They had rushed to Delki when they heard Jin was in danger. And of course, we can't forget the person who played a big part in the victory this time. Jet, looking a bit beaten up, was pointing at Muraken, hoping Jin would make things right for him. I just told him what was going on, and he still beat me up like this. At that point, Jin asked Kashmir about the situation with Den Marius. Kashmir replied that no matter how many times they interrogated him, the man refused to speak, saying he would only talk when Jin was present. About an hour later, Jin arrived at Den's location. Facing the man who had been saved by his actions, Jin didn't beat around the bush and got straight to the point. You asked about the person who taught Den martial arts, along with Kujin and Varys. After a bit of hesitation, Den answered in a trembling voice. The first flag bearer of the Runcandel family, Luna's caretaker, Taemun Marius. She is our mother. Meanwhile, in a different place, Kujin and Varys had successfully escaped and returned to report to their mother. Naturally, the only response they received was a look of disdain from Taemun. You not only failed, but you also revealed your identities to a swordmaster. It seems like both of you really want to die, don't you? After a moment of harsh scolding, Taemun snapped at Kujin and Varys to get out of her sight. From now on, our relationship is completely over. Clearly, those words struck like a thunderbolt for the two of them kneeling on the ground. However, judging by Taemun's firm tone, it was clear she had no intention of changing her mind. You've made a huge mistake. At this point, Varys still couldn't accept it. She clung to her mother's legs, bending her with a promise that this would never happen again. But the only response she got was Taemun kicking her away. Don't ever let me see you two again. As for Kujin, his attitude was completely different from Varys's. He simply left a message wishing peace for his mother and quickly took Varys away. After they left the house where they had just talked, Taemun, the wet nurse, began to think through everything that had happened. She guessed that the swordsman they had mentioned was likely Jin. She was also fairly certain that he would quickly investigate and find the young lady. However, Taemun believed that Lady Luna wouldn't be able to harm her. So the most important thing now was information about young Master Jin. He had dark powers and could use magic, which was definitely something the other person didn't know. Looking at it this way, those two hunting dogs who had been trained since childhood were completely useless after all. Back with Jin's group, Den asked about Allah's information and Jin told him that Allah was dead. However, Jin also added that before he met him, Allah had spoken of someone called that person. The one who ordered my death was that person, not Taemun. Hearing this, Den started telling the story from 15 years ago. Around the time Allah left Delki, he had mentioned that Taemun's mother had made a deal with someone from the Runcandel family, and if the deal was exposed, all the children would be in danger. Jin then asked for more details about the deal, but Den didn't know anything else about it. If that's the case, then you're suggesting that someone from the Runcandel family holds a higher position than Taemun. After thinking for a moment, Jin quickly left, surprising everyone around him. Is there anyone else besides Luna? She was the one who was closest to Taemun. At the first flag bearer's residence, Luna was talking to Ludica about the situation with the Collin family in the city, and it seemed like everything was going really well. Luna thought to herself that Jin would probably be thrilled if he heard this news. Just as she was thinking that, Jin appeared out of nowhere. While they were talking, someone outside announced that young Master Jin was waiting at the door. It must be something urgent for the youngest to come here in the middle of such a stormy night. Time passed, and all that could be heard inside the room was Luna's laughter. You're telling me that Taemun's nanny raised those orphan children to be assassins and is somehow connected to the one who cursed me. Luna could only smile and think that this was just a teasing joke from the youngest. She was on a break right now, so it was probably best for Jin to come back at another time. However, Jin's expression remained unchanged and he didn't say anything else. That made Luna truly angry, not because of his actions, but because of what he had said. How could she believe that her own nanny was the one who killed her beloved little brother? Luna took a deep breath, starting to calm down and think things through. If this was true, then either the people at the orphanage had lied or Taemoon was somehow involved in all of this for some reason. With Jin's surprised gaze on her, Luna made up her mind. "We need confirmation from the foster mother," she said firmly. A few hours later, at Taemoon's house, she was deep in thought about everything that had happened. First, there was the fate of Kunjin and Varys. Ever since their identities were exposed, they become targets of that person. But all things considered, everything was still fine. What she needed to focus on now were the matters involving young Master Jin. How could he have learned magic when that power had been wiped out of the Runcandel family for hundreds of years? Just as she was lost in thought, the sound of footsteps broke her concentration. Luna and young Master Jin had arrived. Without wasting time, Luna got straight to the point. "Do you know anything about Varys Marius and Kujin Marius, foster mother?" Luna thought Taemoon would deny it, but instead, she admitted it. "Yes, I know about them, miss." Hearing this, Luna asked why Taemoon had raised assassins and allowed them to attack Jin. This time, however, she did deny it. Taemoon said that the actions of those two had nothing to do with her, and that she was completely shocked when she found out what had happened. "That's also why I've been waiting here for you, miss." Of course, Luna couldn't believe these lies. She turned to her nursemaid and asked why she was doing this. "The Taemoon I know now is not the same person I once knew. Why, after everything, can't you just tell the truth?" In response, Taemoon gave a simple explanation. "It's about survival. I have to lie in order to stay alive. Maybe you don't know how many enemies we have in this family, or the dangers I face every single day." Seeing Luna's confused expression, Taemoon knew that the young lady had no idea about this. "Do you know why most of the servants only work for about a year? Even the knights who protect us or the maids sometimes only last a month. The reason is that they were all killed right after by the flag-bearers of the family, those brothers and sisters that the young lady always held dear. She chose to remain silent about the enemies standing behind them, even though Lady Luna was determined to speak out. I didn't say anything because I understood very well what kind of person the young lady was. Even if I told you, could you bring yourself to strike your own flesh and blood? Of course not, lady. You would only give them a punishment that doesn't truly matter. Did you give up the competition for head of the family just because you didn't want to harm your siblings? This was also the moment when your subordinates were seen as mere prey. Taemoon recalled 35 years ago, the first time she truly felt what real power was. In that shabby orphanage, I was originally meant to be a loyal dog to the Delki nobility. But then, the Runcandel family recognized my talents and took me in as a caregiver for their household. They brought me into a life as a real person, not as an animal, a daughter of the Runcandel family. I'm truly grateful to Lady Luna because she gave me this power. Luna Runcandel, who is like a small, warm angel. The children born into the Runcandel family after Luna were all considered her rivals. However, this was never an issue because the head of the family had already declared that Lady Luna possessed more talent than anyone else. Even as a child, she was able to defeat all of her older siblings in the beginner classes by herself, an impressive feat to say the least. But then Lady Luna said, "I don't like fighting." Despite having rare talents in the family, her innocence made me worry for her. However, over time, I realized my worries were unnecessary. Every move she made, every action she took, showed no sign of weakness. As a child, each younger sibling she defeated was humiliated and discarded like trash in her eyes. As time passed and she turned 13, the concerns I once had were completely gone. In their place was an overwhelming presence, one that made the entire Runcandel family tremble in fear. More time went by, and on a rainy day, Lady Luna said to me, "I want to stop all of the younger siblings and everyone else in the family. I don't want to become the head of this family. For a family to survive, it shouldn't require the death of its own members. That's not a worthy answer. Instead of becoming the head, I want to achieve something great that will help the family without harming any of its members. I will become the sword that protects this family." At 19, when Lady Luna's puberty came to an end, it also marked the conclusion of Taemoon's quest for revenge. The sacrifices and suffering I had endured over the years were meant to transform the young lady into the head of the household and use her to get back at those who wronged me. But in the end, Lady Luna turned out to be nothing more than a whale swimming out of a myth, while I was just a hungry fisherman helplessly watching and chasing after her. That day, she found a new dream, but mine shattered beyond repair. Not long after, her younger siblings realized how much their sister had changed and began doing insane, inhumane things. Even for someone like me, who had carried out countless assassination missions, the acts they committed were too much to bear. I told myself that I couldn't let the young lady know because it would only make her blame herself. My choice was to raise loyal dogs, just like I had been raised. I planned to take in a few useful orphan children so that I could exact my revenge on my own. But in the end, everything came to an end. That person discovered who I really was. Taemun Marius is both a guide and the top assassin for the Moon sect. He made an offer to me, seeking my submission, and he knew exactly the truth behind that smile. That Taemun, the wet nurse, had always longed for freedom and was always looking for a way to do something. So come to me, he said, and I will give you the freedom you've always dreamed of. That day, a person who had always been waiting for the giant whale finally heard the sound of salvation. I'm sorry, miss, but I had hoped you would never find out about this. No matter the reason, the truth is I secretly trained soldiers and had them point their swords at young Master Jin. Even though I didn't directly give the orders, it's still a crime that deserves death. I must pay for all the wrongs that have happened, so I reported everything to the main house earlier. Hearing Taemun say this, Jin was horrified. Could the executioner of the family be what the nursemaid was talking about? She really had been a step ahead of everyone. At this point, Jin could only ask a few random questions. It seems like you have someone backing you, Taemun Marius. I don't know who it is, but whoever managed to save you in the family court must be someone with a lot of power. In response, Taemun's attitude clearly showed that she believed she would be saved. Even if I am executed, I will just consider it an unfortunate event. It seemed like she was talking too much for someone who was about to die. For someone as expendable as her, would he really step in to save her? Jin's next words brought Taemun back to reality, but she didn't say anything else. She simply asked to leave under the guard of the family's soldiers. Indeed, the young master's ability to go this far wasn't just due to luck. As young Master Jin had just mentioned, it's likely that person had abandoned me. But perhaps even he didn't realize that with the information I hold, I could save lives right now. Before I could finish that thought, the guard beside me whispered, "He sent you a message. Say you did well." As he spoke, he drew his sword, clearly intending to silence me. The soldiers around us immediately sensed something was off. Why would your knight, whose job is to escort prisoners like you, try to kill my nurse? It seems you've forgotten who I am, I said, my voice carrying authority. The force of my words made the guards drop to their knees, bowing to the floor. Above us, Jin guessed that these guards weren't knights from the family, but rather hired mercenaries. A knight of execution would never defy Luna's orders, but right now, threatening them wouldn't help. They were dead men sent here to silence the truth. They'd rather die than leave without taking Taemun down with them. At the same time, as Jin was thinking this, the knights below started rushing toward the nurse to kill her. Of course, Jin couldn't just stand there and watch. With swift precision, he sliced through the arm of the first attacker, cleanly splitting it in two. And without missing a beat, he severed the man's head, removing it from his body as if nothing unusual had happened. As for the others, they were charging toward Taemun. However, their advance was immediately stopped by Luna's massive sword. Two of them were split in half by the blade before they even had a chance to react. Still, one person managed to appear right in front of the wet nurse. Just as he was about to strike, he didn't expect Luna to have such incredible speed. She practically teleported, slamming his head into the ground before he could do anything. As for the desperate swordsman, despite being severely injured, he still tried to stab Luna with his dagger in a last-ditch effort to get revenge. But it seemed he hadn't thought things through. The moment the blade touched Luna's armor, it shattered instantly under her overwhelming strength. Now all four of the thugs had either been defeated or subdued. Jin looked coldly at Taemun, simply stating that he was right. Her master had never intended to save her. In fact, he was plotting to kill her. On the other side, Luna was interrogating the last remaining thug. If you want to die in one piece, you'd better answer my question. But after asking, Luna's expression shifted to one of surprise. Beneath his mask, his face was completely disfigured, and there was no sign of life left in him. Poison, she muttered. He had committed suicide before she could get any answers. He then turned to Taemun and continued, "You should come clean about everything. Now that things have turned out like this, you shouldn't keep pretending to be deaf and dumb." Luna felt the same way. She was incredibly disappointed, especially since she had asked Taemun to investigate the people who were hurting Jin. But now, she realized it was Taemun herself who had been behind it all. As the questions piled up, Taemun's wet nurse could only offer a helpless smile. "I knew something like this would happen eventually, but I guess I'm just getting old. I never expected to fall for such an obvious assassination attempt." As she spoke, Taemun recalled the moment just minutes earlier when the first attacker charged at her. With each word from the wet nurse, Luna started to understand what was really going on with her. She rushed over to help Taemun up, but it seemed like it was already too late. The poison had spread too far through her body, and she was lying in the arms of the trembling young lady. Taemun weakly explained that the poison was something she had taught Hujin to use, and she suspected it was what people might call karma. Luna, however, no longer had the usual dignified demeanor of a young lady from the Runcandel family. In that moment, all she cared about was that the person who had been with her since she was born could survive. When did everything start to go wrong? Maybe it was then. At that moment, Tae-Mu was tormenting herself for betraying the one person who had trusted her the most. The image that flashed in her mind was no longer of the young mistress, but of hatred. Still, at least in her final moments, she felt she had to do something for her young mistress. With that thought, Tae-Mu turned to Lady Luna and young Master Jin to say her final words. Please listen carefully to what I'm about to say. 15 years ago, the one who cursed young Master was Kedar Hall. He's a well-known figure, so I'm sure you'll find him soon enough. And there's one more thing. The person who gave me this poison, the one who ordered me to harm young Master, is Joshua Runcandel, the second in line to inherit the Runcandel family. He knows all about young Master's power and the contract. As soon as she finished speaking, Tae-Mu started coughing up blood as the poison took a deeper hold on her body. She apologized to Luna and recalled all the memories they had shared together. The day the young mistress gave up her position, the moment she proudly declared that she had defeated all her siblings, and the time when they first met. Lady Luna, please don't remember this lowly servant anymore. Those were the final words of Nurse Tae-Mu, spoken in her last moments. At the same time, in the mansion of the second young master, Joshua, he was calmly putting out his cigarette. Tae-Mu Marius. She must be dead by now, right? He murmured. Meanwhile, outside, a servant came in to announce that Tae-Mu's children had arrived to meet the young master. They were Kujin and Varys, the children abandoned by their mother. A few minutes later, Joshua allowed them to enter. Without much of a greeting, he went straight to the point and asked about the sudden cut-off in their contact with Tae-Mu. Weren't you two abandoned by her? Then why are you here? Sir Joshua, I'll do anything. Varys answered quickly in response to his question. I'll do whatever it takes as long as you can change my mother's mind. We can't live without her, so please, I'll do anything you ask. After hearing Varys' desperate pleas, Joshua stood up slowly and walked toward the two of them. Kujin and Varys, I'm sorry, but I can't grant your request. It seems you haven't heard the latest news. The truth is, your mother didn't abandon you out of hatred. Instead, she was trying to save you, because she's dead. Tae-Mu was killed by a swordsman, one I don't even know the identity of. She had warned me that she was in danger, and I immediately sent knights to help, but they were all killed along with her. At that moment, after Joshua's words, the only image that appeared in Varys' mind was of a single person, one who possessed the power of both magic and swordsmanship, a swordmage bound by a pact with the dark god Soldaret. It didn't matter where he came from or who he was. She would find him, no matter the cost, and avenge her mother. Seeing the anger in Kujin and Varys, Joshua also expressed sympathy for both of them. I understand how you feel, but now is not the time for this. We need to wait for the right moment. Trust me. Until then, because I also owe him something. In that way, Kujin and Varys were successfully influenced by Joshua, convinced that everything was the fault of Jin Runcandel. It seemed like Tae-Mu had raised some good children, ones willing to sacrifice their lives for a mother they weren't even related to by blood. On top of that, they had to thank the youngest one, for it was because of them that Tae-Mu had been removed early. As they secretly smiled to themselves, a guard stepped in from outside, urgently reporting that there was something important to announce. From their brief conversation, it seemed like something had happened outside the mansion. After speaking, Joshua immediately turned to Kujin and instructed, You two stay here for now until I give further instructions. As for what's happening outside, it's a family matter, so you don't need to worry about it. Meanwhile, outside at the second son's mansion, Joshua's men were desperately trying to calm Luna's fury. Even though she was the eldest daughter, she couldn't be allowed to act like this. But the words of these little soldiers didn't even reach Luna anymore. Just answer my question. Where is Joshua? You better not start talking about family rules. As the flybearer of the Runcandel family, I'll do whatever I need to do, she declared. With that, Luna immediately unleashed her aura, releasing a powerful wave that sent all the soldiers around her crashing to the ground. Now you better show up before I reach my breaking point. As soon as Luna finished speaking, a voice came from behind her, Joshua's voice. I didn't expect to find you here, my dear older sister. Looks like something happened to make you come here so suddenly without any warning. You don't look so good. How amazing you are, Joshua Luna. Luna immediately responded, Are you so afraid of me that you're hiding behind the Black Knights and talking like this? Do you think I came here to kill you? Joshua kept up his obedient look, gently advising his older sister not to say such things. Can you tell me about the awful things you've gone through? I'll listen as family. Clearly he was trying to provoke Luna, his sister. If the Grand Flagbearer took action right here, it would be the moment when the entire Runcandel family would fall into his hands. There would be no one left to stop him from becoming the family head. Sorry to disappoint you, little brother, Luna said with a smile. I didn't come here to kill you. Instead, I came to give you a reminder of the last bit of affection a sister has for her brother. The day the youngest returns is also the moment you won't be able to keep that smile of yours anymore. By then, it's best you run far away, because if you don't, you might regret not being killed here today. Luna left, with words that Joshua thought were nothing more than empty threats. It was hard to believe that my respected older sister could say something like that. Instead of using her natural strength, she was resorting to pointless words. Joshua muttered to himself, still angry, "My older sister, I'll leave you alone for now because the Zipple family is still around. But once everything is over and Runcandel is mine, that will be the moment you become the first one I get rid of." Outside, Jin could tell that Luna was troubled, so he asked directly, "Are you okay?" Luna answered, "I'm fine. Thanks to you, I was able to hold back my emotions." Just like you said, Joshua kept provoking me while hiding behind the Dark Knights. When Jin heard about this group of knights, even he felt uneasy. It was known that out of all the knights in the family, only the 10 most elite were chosen to be part of the Dark Knights. These Dark Knights only took orders from the head of the family and his wife. So why were they standing with Joshua now? Even though Jin didn't know how he had convinced their father, it was clear that the Dark Knights had now sided with him. Standing in front of the nanny's grave, Jin couldn't help but reflect on the horrific scene earlier. The poison that killed her was truly terrifying. It had even melted her body beyond recognition. I couldn't even bury her properly. It's hard to believe that those closest to her had to endure that same poison. So I guess it's no surprise that she betrayed me. At this moment, Luna felt like she was the one responsible for everything that had happened. If I had only reassured her from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Jin wasn't surprised by Luna's feelings. No matter how much Taemoon had betrayed her, she was still family. As for Joshua, her younger brother, he had become her sworn enemy. She had always hated the rivalry between siblings. Luna spoke up, her voice breaking the silence ahead. To be more exact, it's the hostility between blood relatives that scares me. I'm afraid that I, along with my siblings, might repeat the mistakes of the past. That's why I chose to be the sword protecting our family. Thanks to me, none of us have to die. But in that moment, she realized, painfully and foolishly, that she had only been running away all this time, afraid to fight. This was the price she had to pay for her cowardice. From now on, there would be no more sword protecting the family. If anyone dares to harm you, I'll cut them down. And if you need me to, I'll destroy anything that stands in your way. From now on, my sword is yours. With those words, Luna unexpectedly knelt before her younger sibling. She knew it was all her fault. If she had been more proactive, Joshua and Taemoon wouldn't have ended up the way they did. So, from now on, her goal was to fully support Jin, even if it meant turning her back on all her other siblings. This was the price she had to pay for her cowardice all these years. As for Jin, he immediately knelt down and swore an oath to Luna. "I will stand by you. I will block anyone who tries to harm you. And even if it means going against our own siblings, I will do it. Do you remember what you said back then? No matter what you become or what you do, I will always support you. So the day I return as a flag bearer will also be the day I protect you, because we are family." That's right, Luna thought to herself, this arrogant younger sibling of mine is my family. She vowed silently, "I will stop at nothing to help you become the head of the family." The next morning, for some unknown reason, Mr. Murakin was shouting loudly from early on, "Damn it! Son of a bitch, they invited a sorcerer to cast a curse. That damn Joshua. Even though it's been 1,000 years, this still feels like an unprecedented event from the Tamar era. It turned out that Mr. Murakin and Gilly had just discovered the curse on Jin. After a long bout of yelling, Gilly finally asked, "Yum Master, what's the reason Joshua wants to harm you?" "There are a lot of reasons, but the most important one is that even though he knows I've made a pact with the Dark God, he acts like it doesn't matter at all." "That's true, isn't it? He even broke the rules of Storm Castle to try and hurt you. But back home, he hasn't done anything." In response, Jin said he would figure it out soon enough. If your theory is right, then he's probably targeting my pact, considering what happened with Emiya and the possibility of stealing Zipple's pact. But still, Joshua can't be that close to Zipple. Could there be another way to steal a pact? While thinking, Kashmir entered with a report. "Young Master, I found the person you asked about." As he spoke, he handed a notice to Jin. He's a fairly famous wizard, now retired in the Mentador region on the eastern continent. Since joining the Advanced Magic Academy at Zipple, he's always used the alias Amal. I've heard he's currently researching some kind of magic. After hearing everything, Jin solemnly said to the other three, "I have an important request. For the next 3 months, please don't come looking for me." At the same time, in another part of the eastern continent, a mysterious figure had just entered a tavern. "Excuse me, are you Amal?" the stranger asked. "Who are you?" Amal responded, his voice rough. The stranger introduced himself. "I'm Hewell, an ambitious wizard, and I'm on my way to enroll at the Meltador Academy of Magic. However, I heard there's a sage here, so I made it a point to come and beat you." "What are you staring at, you insects?" Amal slammed his fist on the table and shouted at the crowd. Get out of here before I turn you all into dust. Now tell me who you really are. Don't try to lie to me. That body of yours belongs to someone who has spent his entire life mastering weapons. An ambitious wizard, huh? Seems like you're underestimating me. Reveal your true identity, or I'll make sure your body can never use magic again. All right, let me introduce myself properly, the man named Hewell said, straightening up. My name is Hewell Hister, the last living member of the Hister family. I swore that no one would touch this body without my permission. As he spoke, he pulled out a book of some sort. Hewell began flipping through the pages, much to Amal's surprise. From what Amal could tell, this magical book truly belonged to the Hister family. Amal had spent his entire life searching for clues about it, so he knew he wasn't mistaken. Hey, have you decided where you're staying tonight? Amal asked after a moment. If not, follow me. I'll make sure you're treated properly. An hour later, they were in Amal's private study. The room was very secluded. Amal asked, now will you tell me, how is it that you, a Hister, are still alive? It was then that Hewell began to recount everything. He explained that he had been raised by a mercenary named Grey Owl, who had taken him in as an orphan. Hewell continued, even though I started wielding a sword at a young age, I had no real talent for it. On the other hand, I was able to grasp magic instantly, like I had known it all along. That happened after I discovered the legacy of my family in the last will of the clan leader. As soon as Amal heard this, he immediately recognized it as the Hister family's magic script, the power to manipulate history, something that could even threaten the Zippel clan. Hewell went on, I had planned to join a magic academy and keep my identity hidden. Amal interrupted, but didn't Zippel wipe out every last Hister, causing trouble 300 years ago? The bounty on a Hister's head is at least 10 million gold coins. Amal looked at Hewell and continued, so choose. You can either live like this for the rest of your life, or you can become my apprentice and be recorded in the archives. My real name is Kedar Hall. They call me Counterflow Kedar Hall. Before Hall's introduction, Hewell jumped up in surprise, which even made Hall wonder. Well, before someone like you, the mouth still smelling of milk, was even born, my name had already spread far and wide. How could I not know about it? The story of how Sir Kedar became a 9-star wizard without any help from Zippel is legendary. I've even heard that he fought Zippel and taught them a lesson. No need to flatter me any further. If you become my apprentice, I'll teach you a type of magic called counterflow. Now make your choice. Will you become my disciple, Hewell Hister? A long time ago, Amal had stumbled upon traces of the Hister magical lineage, and from that moment, he had become captivated, chasing the mystery ever since. Now, with the trail of clues finally leading to an end, Hewell Hister had appeared. He came holding a spellbook. With that book, Amal believed that his counterflow magic would reach new heights. If he passed on his perfected counterflow magic to this apprentice, his legacy would live on forever. And so, Amal began teaching Hewell the art of counterflow magic. Good, I think we can move on to advanced counterflow now. But Hewell, that spellbook of yours, can't you show it to me again? Yet, Hewell bluntly rejected his teacher's offer. This really angered the old man. Do you know that if I wanted to just take that book from you by force, it would be easier than eating porridge? But still, I've always respected your beliefs, so let's just end this and hand it over. It seemed like it would be one of those typical old man threatening the young moments. But then, unexpectedly, Amal apologized and told Hewell to forget everything that had just happened. Hey master, what if we shared our beliefs with each other? You should give me something valuable, something like your life itself. Give me the counterflow book. Right after saying that, Amal immediately went to get his book. He told Hewell to wait because it was stored at the Vankella Castle. The counterflow book is there, so I have to go get it myself. Got it? The counterflow book was the precious knowledge that Amal had planned to pass on when the day came for him to leave this world. But what did that even mean? If he got his hands on the Hister book, he could defeat the Zippel family. With that book, he could secure his place in history. After a long period of time, Amal finally returned with the counterflow asterisk book. As for Hewell, he had also mastered advanced counterflow techniques as if he had known them all along. Truly a genius. Well done. This is what you wanted, Amal said, immediately handing over his essence to his disciple. The Hister book also quickly ended up in his hands. Although it would take time to decode, it wasn't a major concern. At this moment, Amal was eager to take his disciple to practice counterflow on the local insect pests. Wait, can counterflow be used on non-human opponents? Hewell asked, puzzled. Well, of course not, Amal replied. I'm talking about the insects living in the town, the ones that are like us but can't use magic. When I was younger, I used them to practice in real-life situations. Hewell thought for a moment and then said, I have an idea, Master. Before we start training, why don't you try using counterflow directly on me? Wouldn't it be more effective to feel it in your own body? Hearing this, Amal chuckled excitedly. Ha ha! Well said, my disciple. You make me so proud. All right then. Watch closely. This is asterisk counterflow asterisk with precision control, which can steal magic from an opponent and trigger asterisk counterflow asterisk. Now I'm going to absorb your magic, so focus. However, just a few seconds later, Amal realized something was wrong. The counterflow magic was not working at all. Asterisk, don't tell me Huel's magic has surpassed the 7-star level. Asterisk, Amal thought to himself. Asterisk, no, it's even stronger than that. This power. It's beyond 9-star magic. Asterisk. As those thoughts crossed his mind, Amal was seriously injured when the counterflow magic backfired. Master, you should take a look at this, a voice rang out. This is an artifact called Asterisk Track Quang Asterisk. It holds an endless amount of magic. Thanks to it, even after being attacked by you, I'm unharmed. And there was something else. The voice continued, why don't you try to see who I really am? Because of you, I was about to live out the rest of my life in misery. Do you remember the child you cursed at Storm Castle 15 years ago? My name is Jin Runcandel. I've returned from hell to kill you today. It can't be. Amal protested. Even my mercenaries confirmed your identity. Well, of course, Jin said, kicking the old man's head into the ground. Because that's the story of the sole survivor of the Hister family. Don't regret it. I'm going to use the asterisk counterflow asterisk book, the one you poured your entire life into, as best as I can. And by the way, that asterisk counterflow asterisk magic also belongs to Hister, right? I'll make sure the whole world knows it's Hister's. That way, all your fake accomplishments will disappear. You'll be completely forgotten in this world, you damn old man. Your curse is what started all of this. You should be grateful I'm letting you go peacefully. But before that, I should do this, right? You won't succeed. Joshua, just wait. This is where everything begins. It had been 3 months since Jin discovered the person who had cursed his body. And Joshua, the second son of the Runcandel family, was the mastermind behind it all. One morning, just like any other at the swordsmanship dojo, Gilly, the wet nurse, and Murekin were both waiting for Jin's return, their faces tired and weary. It had been 3 months since young master set off to find that sorcerer, but he still hadn't come back. Seeing Gilly's sadness, Murekin added fuel to the fire. Ever since he became my disciple, that kid's been saying he'd wait for the perfect moment to beat me. But when I think about it, that kid's actually pretty clever. Just before he could finish talking badly about him, Gilly picked him up like a cat without a word. She was both crying and deeply worried about young Master Jin. He always makes me worry about these pointless things. Does Mr. Murekin know how much I worry about young Master? Well, of course not. I'm not Jin, so how would I know? Murekin replied, though he quickly added, before that, Hugh Fester probably investigated. Does Kedart still trust Jin? That kid might be able to fool him. But neither of them knows that the person they're talking about is standing right behind them. It's almost as if I made old man Kedart fall for me, huh? Jin suddenly spoke up, surprising both Gilly and Murekin. Young master, the two of them called out in unison, and soon enough, the black cat, Murekin, was pushed aside. I'm so glad you've returned safe and sound. After responding to Gilly, Jin turned toward Murekin, who was still lying on the ground, holding a book in his hand. He introduced it as something he had gotten from old man Kedart. Please help me translate this. That same evening in the Sword Garden, a meal took place as usual among the Runcandel family members. However, the atmosphere seemed quieter than usual. Sitting at the center of the table was none other than the second son and the next family head, Joshua Runcandel. Beside him, a stack of documents laid out detailing the latest news. Jin Gray, a prime suspect in the murder of Kedar Hall. There was still no answer to why he had committed the act. It could be because of that counterflow magic, but unfortunately, the essence of that magic was believed to be hidden in the eternal treasury of the Vankella Holy Kingdom. The calm atmosphere was suddenly broken when Haytona spoke up. I'm sure that's the Flybearer's identity, the youngest one. All of Haytona sitting next to him quickly told his twin brother, shut up. The boy kept rambling on. Even though the name Jin Gray was fairly common, he insisted, I believe it's Jin. Just then, a loud slap from Mew made the two brothers jump in surprise. You're such fools, Mew snapped. You've never even met a 9-star mage, and you're talking nonsense. There's no way the youngest could defeat a 9-star mage. Now shut up. You're ruining the meal. Mary, noticing the commotion, also threatened the younger ones. A deep, steady clap echoed through the room. Sitting at the center, Joshua called all of his younger siblings to attention. That's enough, he said calmly. It's been so long since we've all eaten together like this, so let's not ruin it by getting angry. Then he thought to himself, our youngest might have killed Kedar Hall. Joshua's words surprised everyone. Of course, the youngest couldn't have done it alone, but if that kid named Yona helped him, it might just be possible. A soft remark, yet it struck like a lightning bolt to all the flag bearers. One of the brothers slammed his hand on the table and immediately spoke out against the argument. That's enough. Brother, are you really suspicious of Jin, even though he's a young flag bearer? And now you're dragging Yona into this too. I'm sick of all these schemes. Nearby, Mary also asked if he could take responsibility for what he said about Yona helping the youngest. Seeing the younger siblings getting upset, Joshua quickly laughed it off, saying it was just his own speculation. A 9-star mage had died, but the cause of death was still unknown. It's important to note that this was something very few could pull off unless it was done by the mysterious figure known only as the Nameless. The Nameless Society was recognized as the world's top assassination organization, and it had been a while since Yona had joined them, following her father's orders. He thought the youngest must have made a deal with the Nameless to attract attention, and of course, Yona, who felt abandoned by her family, had stepped in to help Jin in order to bring the youngest to her side. But Mary wasn't convinced at all. Hadn't the oldest brother been hoping for something bad to happen to Yona for a long time? And there was no reason for her to suddenly get involved with the youngest. However, you agreed with Joshua's point of view. If Yona really helped the youngest, then the tasks the youngest did when he was still a cadet makes sense. Besides, I'm genuinely curious about what that asterisk bitch asterisk Yoma thinks about this family. But still, it's best to focus on saving my own life first. Before she could finish her sentence, Mary punched her younger sibling for speaking recklessly, surprising the other siblings around them. Mew could have even lost her life in that moment if it hadn't been for Diffa stepping in to stop her. Don't go overboard, Mary. The more you react like this, the more things will play out exactly as our eldest brother, Joshua, wants. In the end, Mary had no choice but to let go. The 7th flag bearer couldn't possibly defy the 2nd flag bearer. But remember this clearly, Mary continued, if we dare harm Yona, Father will definitely not just sit back and watch. Sometimes you should speak more directly, Joshua replied. Brother Joshua, if you're afraid of Yona, then all you have to do is defeat her and make her your subordinate. So stop using these kinds of provocations. That's not how the Runcandel family does things. Joshua's face remained as expressionless as ever as he responded, if you say that, then you should draw your sword, Diffus. If this were Mary, she would have definitely fallen into the trap, but Diffus is different. He ignored the provocation and simply walked away. Why did you have to do that? A dinner with the Runcandel flag bearers was truly unbearable. Right now, the Tonem brothers probably had only one thing on their minds. Little brother, your 2 older brothers miss you so much. Meanwhile, elsewhere was it true that a 9-star mage had been killed, and the name Jin Gray had been left at the scene. The 2 people talking were Dant and Veradin. Suddenly, Veradin spoke up. Please, Dante, give me a little of your time. Of course, not right now. Tomorrow, or the day after would work too. You and I should go meet with Jin. Just like that, Veradin came up with a plan he thought sounded good, and Dant agreed. Then we'll start tomorrow. Back at the mansion, another person was reporting to the commander about Dan Heron and Veradin Zippel talking in the banquet hall. It had been reported that relations between the Heron and Zippel families weren't great, but it had now been confirmed that the Zippel family was involved in Kedar Hall's death, and that Veradin had provided information to Dante. The Zippel family must be more focused on protecting their allies, cutting ties with those who don't share their views. Kedar Hall is a prime example. After hearing the news, Raz ordered his subordinates to release only the information that would be suitable for the press. He thought that the Zippel family was acting very hastily, unlike their usual style. It almost felt like someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes. As he thought about it, he chuckled. Although he didn't know who that person was, he was certain that keeping up with them wouldn't be easy. Please don't go, Jin. Back at the Hufester headquarters, Julia was sobbing because she knew Jin was about to leave. Even Nurse Gilly was just as sad. As a servant, she felt deep sorrow, seeing that the young master never got a proper moment of rest. You just returned, and now you're leaving again. But does the young master really have to go to that dangerous village, Semel? Why would you go to a place like that? In response to her question, Jin simply said that he needed to collect a few things, and there was someone he wanted to meet. Gilly had a feeling she knew who that person might be, Miss Yoma. At the Semel headquarters of the anonymous organization, Yona had heard the news that her younger sibling had recently been recognized by their father and had left the family to train. What they had already accomplished was truly impressive. I wonder if they'll come to Semel. I really want to play with them. Looking ahead, it seemed clear that Jin's future was about to become very uncertain. Back on Jin's side, Kashmir spoke up, saying, after the young master leaves, I won't be staying here either. While Kashmir casually mentioned that he had left something in Bemin, Jin knew his father had likely summoned him for some other reason. Well, if the person didn't want to talk about it, who was Jin to push? At that moment, Nurekin burst in, kicking down the door with a loud crash. Hey kid, I've finished what you needed. Clearly, it was something related to that book from a few hours ago. According to Miraken, it was something that could be directly engraved onto Jin's back. So about half an hour later, the tattoo was complete. With this new mark, Jin could now use Kidart's counterflow magic. It felt like he'd just been handed a top-tier weapon in an instant. Muraken, standing nearby, couldn't help but comment, "While I was transferring this to you, I saw a lot of useful magic. Honestly, even if a whole group of 7-star mages attacked with just one move, you could easily wipe them out." As Muraken spoke, Jin quickly put on his clothes and tried to release the dark energy. Just as expected, it was far stronger than he had imagined. But something still didn't feel right. At that moment, Enya happened to walk in and froze in shock at the sight. Jin quickly tried to stop her from getting too close, knowing she could get caught up in the magic. "Are you okay, Miss Enya?" he asked. "Well, I guess it's fine, but she looks like she's really high. I'm fine, really. Please go ahead and try again. Honestly, I don't even know what to say." Luckily, just a moment later, Silver Dragon Quickentell quickly delivered a finishing blow. It was a relief she got there in time. "Thank you, Lady Quickentell." The Silver Dragon also apologizes for the inconvenience. "It seems like she disturbed you during your training." She also asked about the rumors that the young master was planning to go to Samel. Quickentell explained that Samel is a place where assassins are trained for the Anonymous Guild. Travelers can't freely go there because they risk being assassinated. Right now, you might be able to handle attacks from some inexperienced trainees, but the longer you stay, the stronger your opponents will get. Eventually, the most ruthless and skilled assassins will target you. I can't guarantee that you or even your sister would survive facing the real assassins from the Anonymous Guild. So take this with you. As she spoke, Quickentell held out a bag of some sort in front of them. Holding it in his hands, Jin seemed to realize something just as Quickentell explained that it was a treasure belonging to the Nameless Guild. "If you're ambushed and can't defend yourself, just show them this. It'll guarantee your survival." Jin was deeply grateful and honestly didn't know how to properly repay the Silver Dragon. Quickentell shook his head, brushing it off. "Just focus on doing well, and the person who signed my contract will be more at ease. Also, when you come back, make sure to help Enya with her training." On May 4th, 1796, the carriage carrying Jin arrived at the southern gate of the assassin city Samil. It came to a halt. Without the Nameless Guild's token, no one could enter. The gatekeeper spoke up as he saw Jin, dressed in mysterious clothes, approach. Jin presented the Nameless Guild token that had been prepared in advance, but he still wasn't allowed entry. "Here's the token. Well, what's your purpose for coming here?" In response to that question, Jin simply said he was here to learn from experience and was hoping to be allowed through. "Yeah, you'll definitely gain some hard-earned experience here. When you leave, you'll get your token back." Jin continued to question the rules that travelers had to follow once they entered this place, but the real surprise was meant for him. Jin easily dodged the sword strike, his eyes wide with disbelief, and delivered a punch that sent the attacker flying backward. "Looks like you've already decided to kill me, huh? From the moment we started this journey, I could feel your murderous intent. You're really no good at being an assassin." After dealing with the driver, Jin turned his attention to the gatekeeper, who was still watching him with a curious look. "Are you planning to attack me too?" "Of course not. We're trained in assassination, not martial arts. I would never face someone head-on like that." And just like that, Jin's first lesson at Samel ended and the gates opened. Ahead of them stood the symbol of the Nameless Society. Their signature color was ivory, since they were confident they would never leave a trace of blood, even if they wore pure white clothing. The scene before him felt peaceful, a sharp contrast to the terrifying reputation of the group. Yet Jin knew all too well that this place was dangerous beyond measure. Countless people were all around him, but strangely, he couldn't feel any murderous intent from them. In a calm, clean city like this, anyone could be an assassin. The cadets were always sharpening their skills to survive in the towering nameless building in the distance. Everyone here was a potential opponent, and they constantly fought each other to rise to the next level. An hour later, at the Lawsman Inn, the innkeeper stood in front. After asking a few general questions, he went straight to the point. "Are you planning to fight with the cadets at Samel, the place where assassination is allowed?" Jin didn't hesitate to admit it. He figured the innkeeper wouldn't let him stay, thinking he'd say Jin wouldn't survive here anyway. However, life doesn't always go as planned. The innkeeper let him inside without hesitation and didn't even ask for rent. His reasoning was simple. Soon enough, Jin would be paying with his life. "Your room is upstairs. Don't worry, I won't attack you while you're in there." Inside, Jin scanned the room carefully, checking for any traps. This was the right moment to plan his next move, but just as he was deep in thought, a chill ran down his spine. His hands instinctively grabbed his sword as he turned toward the source of the sensation. Strangely, there was nothing there. What was that sound? I couldn't even sense anything. What Jin didn't realize was that someone had been calmly watching him from above. "Oh shit, I've been spotted." It was none other than Jin Runcandel, Jin's older sister. Back when Jin was wandering the streets of Samel, Yona spotted a child who looked just like her younger brother, so she decided to follow him. When she got a closer look, she got super excited because it really was her little brother. Meanwhile, Jin was still in a state of confusion after hearing a strange noise. There had clearly been some clapping from the roof, but he couldn't see anything. Maybe his senses were too sharp, and he was just imagining it. The older one above him still had that playful expression on her face as she watched Jin. Yona could tell her brother was on high alert. After all, this was the same old unnamed guild where danger was always lurking. With that thought in mind, Yona quickly passed by where Jin was sitting. Jin sensed something and turned around, but once again, there was nothing there. Wow, did this kid just sense my presence? It seems like his spiritual senses are already half awakened. At such a young age, he's already reached this level. I'm so proud. As his older sister, I really need to train him properly. That said, it honestly seemed like the sister just wanted her younger brother to entertain her. 4 days later, the innkeeper unexpectedly approached Jin and told him he needed to leave. He also explained that he had given up on his plan to assassinate him. I admit defeat. When I saw you with the unnamed guild token, I thought you were from some prestigious family, but I didn't realize you were this strong. I can't detect any openings from you at all. I admit I'm not on the same level as you. You are definitely an unusual person, and this is the first time I've seen someone like you here. You've been praised to the skies, but honestly, Jin isn't as skilled as he thinks he is. It's just that for the past 4 days, you've been so cautious about the presence around you that you didn't leave any openings. The elder slammed his hand on the table, clearly disappointed. The fact that I couldn't assassinate the traveler who came here is a huge drawback. I have another promotion test coming up soon, and I've decided to give up, which is why I wanted you to leave. Of course, after giving you this lesson, I'll offer a few pieces of advice. When dealing with assassins, you need to treat them like magicians or con artists, always staying alert. The moment you leave this house, they are the kind of people you'll have to face. Good luck with your test. Jin quickly expressed his thanks, then left the room. But something felt off as he stepped outside. Was this a trap? Who set all this up? As that thought flashed through his mind, the owner's words echoed again. When fighting an assassin, treat them like a magician or a con artist. That's right, those traps were just bait, and Jin was about to fall into the assassin's poison dart trap from above. Fortunately, thanks to the main character's luck, he sensed it in time and managed to defend himself. Damn it! The assassin saw his plan fail and only left 2 words behind before quickly fleeing. You think you can escape? Jin immediately chased after him, determined to make him pay. At this point, realizing it was a mistake would have been too late. The escape earlier had been nothing but a trap to lure him into an ambush. One of them controlled the wires, lifting all the traps from the floor. As for Jin, though surprised by this, there was no choice but to fight. He drew his sword and began to block the incoming traps. However, after a while of holding his ground, something even more surprising happened. In some miraculous way, while fending off the traps, they managed to control his sword. Well, I guess it's time to get down to business. That sword is useless now.